What's up, everybody? Welcome to Real Talk with Antoine D. Thurston. Got that jazz in the background. Hey, Kiki. Welcome, everybody, to Real Talk with Antoine D. Thurston. Everybody having a great day. Everybody had a productive day.
I got it.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome to Real Talk with Antoine D. Thurston, where we have real conversations with real people about real discussions and real issues. I'm so glad to have everyone on here to join us. Had a few difficulties with technology, but that's how technology is. It's
It
man-made.
is.
So I am definitely Antoine D. Thurston, entrepreneur, minister, elder, and an author of my book, My Abundant Freedom, from the Mental Institution to the Pulpit. Uh, Available ebook and paperback on my website, AntoineDThurston.com. But little of me, more of you. Sheila, I'm so glad to have you as a guest on my talk show. And I'd love to have you. Can you please introduce yourself to the people and tell us a little bit about
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my name is Nashiba Parker. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed in Florida, also in New Jersey. Um, and I am just so happy to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I like that. So, what made you pursue counseling or becoming a certified licensed marriage counselor and family therapist? What caused you? What triggered you? What triggered you?
So I was initially, I was someone who was always interested in like psychology, and understanding like how people functioned. Um, but I also grew up in neighborhoods where going to counseling was just something that was very stigmatized. So
Mhm.
initially, I definitely steered away from the field. But what really got me interested is I grew up in a family of helpers. So my father is a minister, my mother is a nurse.
Okay.
So people were constantly like coming around to my house. I mean, even to present day,
Okay.
from, any random day you show up to my parents' house, there might be someone who is homeless. maybe someone who's unemployed or a worker or just someone from the community. I mean, we are just a family of people who have always sort of been in the arena of helping. One of the things that I noticed when I was growing up is that other kids who were my friends and who would like, come into my household, they weren't having the same experience I was. I grew up in a family where I felt safe and things were functioning. And the stories that I would hear from friends and children from the community who ended up at our home, they were having completely different experiences. And in my head, I'm just going, like, why can't other Black families have the same experience I'm having? And so that, that kind of sat with me for a very long time, um, until eventually I decided to follow my passion, of helping families to heal themselves, to make themselves whole, and to really just revitalize the Black family. So that was a big part of the passion that I had for getting into both couples and family counseling.
Nice, nice. So when you graduated high school, was that the counseling was something you knew you wanted to do and get into?
No,
No. Okay. What did you
no.
what was your first
So,
pursuit? Mhm.
initially, my first pursuit, I went to Tennessee State University.
Okay.
Yes, I went to TSU in Nashville, and I actually initially went to school for public health. So I have a bachelor's in health sciences with a concentration in public health, and that was my, thought. I'm gonna go help the community. I'm gonna do it through the health profession, because as I said, I thought to myself, they may not show up to me in a counseling setting, but I knew that we got health issues. So I said, I'll go to the next best thing and I'll educate people on how to be healthy. So
Mhm.
for quite a while, I was in the public health, and the health education arena, where I was doing health coaching and counseling people. I would be talking about like basic healthy habits and talking to people about managing their mental health. But I,
Mhm.
again, I was struggling because I'm like, okay, this isn't enough. This isn't enough. And also, I'm way more passionate about the relationship part, whether it's my relationship with myself or our relationship to other people. How do we really heal those things? So eventually, I decided to go back to school, and I attended Nova University, for the family therapy program. And here I am.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. And that's amazing because it's something like you said that's not talked about. It's taboo, especially in the Black community, and
Indeed.
and not just the Black community, the Black church as well.
Very
I
much.
actually had a psychiatric nurse come on my first episode, and she spoke about all the stigmas that came with that because she came out of the church and she's a Christian. But when she got
Hmm.
into psychology, she was saying she learned so much the scientific aspect of mental health that it is a chemical. It's not just all spiritual, but there is a natural component to mental illness, suicide, depression, and there are some prescriptions you can take that will definitely make a difference. There are some medications that you can take, and counseling and therapy you can partake of that can definitely help you overall. And so we got rid of some of those stigmas, this taboo everything's or demonizing everything when it's just not that. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so um, so this episode is overcoming anxiety. And so
Hmm.
from your professional view, what is anxiety? What is anxiety from your professional viewpoint?
So from from my professional view,
Mhm.
um, so in the way that I describe anxiety, in my profession is a little bit different than how many people um, may show up to their doctor.
Okay.
Um, I am a firm believer in, everything making sense in a particular context.
Yes.
Okay, we all have some kind of context to our lives. Everyone has a story.
Yes.
And I see anxiety as playing a functional role in the overall story of our lives. So when I deal with anxiety with my clients, with people who are experiencing challenges around it, a very big part of that is me getting to know the person, so that we can understand the function that anxiety plays in their overall experience. Many people come to us because they're like, I don't like this. I want you to get rid of it. It's disrupting my life. And it's sort of it's a very dualistic kind of, it's a dualistic role that I have to kind of play with my clients, which is, I certainly understand that we are uncomfortable with the symptoms, but I also want us to explore my relationship to this anxiety. It is playing a functional role in my life for a reason, and we need to understand that.
Okay. Okay. And I remember us talking previously on a pre-call like last week, and you mentioned something that is never really heard of. I got a friend that's in the mental health as well, and we all have stressors. We all have stress. Stress is a part of our everyday life. Stress helps us to just push forward, do things, and anxiety can be normal and beneficial. What are some ways anxiety can be beneficial and so forth? How can anxiety be a good thing?
Well, anxiety can absolutely be a normal aspect of everyday life. So we all have anxiety. Many of us come to a mental health professional like myself because anxiety has gotten so big, or it has begun to take over my life in such a way that my life is either less functional or it's just debilitating me altogether, and I'm not able to do things, period. When it comes to the functional aspect of anxiety, anxiety in itself is known for being a disorder of worry. It's known for being a disorder of fear and worry. And so we actually need those things in order to function in life. So if we think of, those prehistoric times, when we go back to those ancient times that we heard about in those history books, we were told that there was a function that we had in culture where we were hunters, we were gatherers. And so if I'm going out to hunt and gather and maybe a lion walks up on me, well, there's an instinct that I have where my body goes into a fight or a flight response. And so that's where things like fear or anxiety come into play. Is I wouldn't have the gumption to make that instinctual choice if I didn't have feelings like anxiety. So they play a functional role. Another great example from everyday life is if I'm running late to work, right? My responsibility is to get to work at, say, 8 a.m. and I'm flying down the interstate, 95 is backed up, right? I'm going to be a little nervous. That nervousness it's keeping me accountable to the responsibilities that I have. And so maybe someone cuts me off. Well, what's the instinct that helps me to know to slam on brakes in order not to crash into this car? So that's where things like fear and anxiety come into play, and they are functional or they're useful in our lives.
I like the way you put it, and you put it in such a healthy perspective, because even, we're both church kids. So we hear, the Bible verses about don't worry, don't be discouraged, and don't be anxious for anything. But those are those humanistic parts that can be motivational. And I've even watched TV shows where it's called a 600-pound life, and these people have, over the board have neglected themselves, and the doctor tells them you're going to die if you don't take care of your health. And so that is a positive anxiety or worry to motivate them to get their life back on track. And like you said, with your profession, people wait until it gets worse before they could have nipped it in the butt. My dad always used to tell me, your body tells on you. Your body's always going to tell on you.
Oh,
and
yes.
And some people, they wait till it gets horrible to want to pursue help. They wait till it gets overwhelming to the place and never dealing with it until it overwhelms them. And they're now in a mental health psych ward. They're in all these things. And I remember being in some of those places on the 6th floor of Imperial Point. and they was in the same spot I was in, and I was realizing these guys didn't know how to deal with stress. So they blew up, they just boom,
Shut
quit,
down.
shut down because the overwhelming stress of the situation or the circumstance has completely taken over. And so they feel that the only need or compensation for it is to lash out or whatever, to take out, to take themselves out or any other reason. And so even in my book, we're talking about the positive, but we're going to talk about the negative as well. I pushed in my book, I said, there was a part in my life where I was trying to go back to school. And every time I would literally like just start getting anxious and shaking and worrying. And it was like, what's going on? I'm trying to move forward. And I couldn't do it. And I quit. And every time I would try, I would become anxious. Let's talk about the negative side effects of that debilitating anxiety, and what causes it, what triggers it, what can we do to overcome it. And I realized, sometimes even with my situation, there were things that I didn't deal with, or the root of it, I didn't deal with. It was unresolved, so I'm still having those anxiety attacks at the moment in my life.
Okay. Get into
So
it, Antoine.
So, I ended up quitting because I couldn't handle the trauma of unresolved issues. And I think so many times, like you said, we haven't solved or healed from certain experiences, so it still plagues us. And some of us don't
Absolutely.
even know. We suppress it. We push it up under the rug, and we think we're over it because we don't have those feelings. But just because the feelings aren't there, don't mean you still didn't have trauma. You know what I'm saying? So from your professional and experiential standpoint, how does a person, you know, start to produce those negative, overwhelming anxiety disorder or anxiety functions?
Okay. So, the way that the way that I'm going to speak about this is from what I call a systemic perspective, or a whole person experience, because we are much more than just our symptoms of anxiety. And like I said before, I generally look at anxiety as playing a functional role in an overall experience for each of us. All of our stories are different. So the anxiety that you are talking about, or the negative anxiety, is often what we refer to in my world as like a clinically diagnosable anxiety. Now, as I said, there's on one end the normal sort of everyday nervousness, anxieties. Even it's normal to worry if I have a test or a job, right? That's everyday anxiety. There is a clinically diagnosable version of anxiety. There are actually even several different categories of this, a number of anxiety disorders. And these are the ones where we are looking at the severity of the disorder. So generalized anxiety disorder is considered like a persistent worry. So what it would generally look like is I'm really apprehensive. I am worrying without particular cause. So like earlier when I gave the example, maybe I have a test, so I'm worried. Well, that's a normal sort of worry, but with generalized anxiety, I may not have a particular reason or a cause for this anxiety, or at least it seems that way on the surface. So this worry just seems to almost like come out of nowhere. It's not attached to a specific situation that is presently happening in my life. Maybe I spend a lot of time worried about the past, something that, happened way in the past. Maybe I spend a lot of time excessively worrying about the future, but it's very persistent in nature. And particularly, we begin diagnosing this when someone has had this occurring for at least 6 months. So that's usually the big difference. When people say, I have anxiety or I'm an anxious person, well, just because I have situational anxiety or experiences where anxiety are happening in my everyday life, it doesn't necessarily mean that I might have a clinical disorder. There are other aspects of anxiety that we consider, the negative parts of anxiety. And that is when we start to see both ends of what happens with a person who struggles with anxiety. So there's a cognitive aspect to it, which is that's the mental part where maybe the worry is occurring. So the thinking brain is having a dilemma. And then also people who struggle with anxiety are having a physiological response. So in combination to the error in thinking, or the persistent worrying, I also start to notice symptoms that show up in my body. As you said, right, the body's it's a strong teller. So it
Mhm.
starts to also get my attention. So maybe I'm restless, maybe I have trouble concentrating, maybe I'm irritable, I have a lot on my mind. I'm constantly thinking, or I'm anxiously worrying about things. So maybe my body even tenses up and I have muscle tension, or I begin having issues with sleep. So once we combine these things together, right, we've sort of created this difficult sort of experience with
Mhm.
worry. And that's again where people begin to start to say, okay, well, now I need to go to someone, because these are the negative aspects. Because, for example, if I'm having a lot of trouble concentrating, maybe I'm not getting things done at work, or
Mhm.
maybe things are not getting done at home. Maybe I am no longer going out to social situations because I'm anxious. Um, Maybe I've gotten to the extent where my anxiety bubbles up and I get into a panic where I feel like I can't breathe, or I'm having a heart attack.
Mhm.
These are some of the more significant effects of anxiety, when those things, as you said, can be bottled up and we haven't yet begun to unpack the things that are contributing to the anxiety.
And you know what? I love what you said in the beginning is some people just come to you because they want you to get rid of the symptoms, but you want to really you want to tap into that relationship because you really won't know. You may see the symptoms, but it's a root to every symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have that relationship with that person, you really can't properly diagnose and treat what they're going through, the symptoms that they have. And so, another example, even with myself, even last year, even years before, I found myself, even after I wrote the book, the book was published last year, but even after I had God restore me, deliver me, like you said, we
Mm-hmm.
have those functional everyday anxieties. But then there were parts of my
Mm-hmm.
life I found myself um, worrying about if people would ask me certain questions about my life. I wasn't where I wanted to be in my life. I'm literally going not crazy, but having a meltdown in my
Yep.
mind because of what my preconceptions, what I preconceive of what people
Mm-hmm.
are asking me. So even being at the table with some good friends of mine, and I'm thinking they're going to ask me certain questions, and they're not going to ask the questions. So I had to take control of my mind and my thoughts and realize this is not true, this is not
Mm-hmm.
real. I'm tormenting and plaguing my own self with worry, and so we have to be very mindful and careful that we don't, medicate ourselves with false ideas and false thoughts because we can be our own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to cast those thoughts down and think on positive and not be so negative and worrisome and look at the cup half empty instead of the cup half full. Um, when it comes to treatment, what are some or solutions? What are some positive ways people can also actually overcome anxiety in their life? What are some practical methods they can use?
Well, before I share the sort of practicality of managing anxiety, I want to go back to what you said just a few moments ago, which is the extent to the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you notice when you were talking about, kind of creating scenarios that do not exist, that's sort of a hallmark trait of the nature of anxiety. Is Usually I can tell that I'm having some challenges with anxiousness if I'm very preoccupied with the past, or I'm maybe preoccupying with the future. And to the extent that I'm catastrophizing, right? I'm thinking about the worst case scenarios about
Yeah.
these situations. So maybe something in the past that's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I may be creating new storylines like, well, this could have happened, or it could have gone that way. Oh, that would have been so much worse.
Yeah.
Or I might do something similar in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is like the sort of cusp of, how some of us might actually experience anxiety. Another thing that I want to touch on is sometimes these symptoms can actually be missed by us. Um, so we do a lot of talking about the severe cases of anxiety, but there are actually people who have what they call high functioning anxiety, and it looks different. Like we can miss it because it actually looks fairly productive in life. And as you said, right, there are things under the root that we haven't yet dealt with, but in life we look very, very functional. We look like very productive people. So an example of a high functioning person with anxiety is kind of like Antoine said, like I can write books, I can do speaking engagements. So overachievers often, or I shouldn't say often, but overachievers can be high functioning
Wow.
people with anxiety. So
Okay.
people who are very hard on themselves, they make a lot of goals. I have to feel like I'm always busy in
Yeah.
order for me to be quote unquote productive. That may be an example of a high functioning case of anxiety.
Right.
If I don't recognize that, as you said, right, like this can get quite severe. Like
Yeah.
before I know it, then I'm creating some really creative storylines in my mind.
Mhm.
And I get to the point where I'm physically then beginning to produce symptoms that are asking me to slow down, sit down somewhere and regroup. Other examples of high functioning anxiety are people who can't say no.
Wow.
People
Wow.
who have a hard time, like if no is not in my vocabulary,
Wow.
then I might need to do a little checking in with myself. Like if I don't have that ability to have a boundary and say I've done enough or this is enough or I'm not available, but
Yeah.
I'm way more compelled to appease other people. I'm worried in the back of my mind about what are people going to say if I say no.
Yeah.
That actually may be an example of a version of some high functioning anxiety. There's something underneath there that we might need to look into. Remember, I told you,
Yeah. Yeah.
I look at people from the context of how anxiety functions in their life, not so much the symptom that shows up that just irritated me that I want Sheba to get rid of. um,
Wow. That's
Let me
amazing.
see. There are lots of other examples like being self-critical, being really hard on myself, someone who actually like I'm no longer getting things done because I can't concentrate. I'm having a lot of difficulty concentrating, getting like everyday tasks done. So maybe my house is a mess, my desk is a mess at work, my car is a hot mess.
Yeah.
You know, I got everything in there that you know I brought from work for the week,
Yeah.
and I can't stop to sit down and to do the self-care or to clear out these things because there are so many other things that are on my plate that I
Yeah.
don't have time to really organize myself. Like those are versions of our environment and our internal selves sending us a message. But
Mhm.
again, maybe because I'm a high functioning person and maybe I make certain amount of money and maybe because I get this productive book written or maybe because I got XYZ thing done, I
Yeah.
appear to be someone productive and functional.
Yeah.
But what the story is really telling from the inside is that there are things that are chaotic and all over the place for me.
Wow. I have never heard that view. I mean, that's astonishing. That's effective. I literally, while you was talking, I can think of people that can't say no. They keep moving and moving and moving and moving. And even with myself, made me look at myself because there are certain things I knew I should have did. I'm like, okay, I'm over functioning even myself because sometimes we have these objectives and these goals, whatever it is, relationship, financial, whatever it may be, and we're so over over anxious to reach those goals, we neglect certain responsibility or, like you said, self care.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us
Mm-hmm.
we don't work. Some people don't work out because they're always working because they're trying to make a dollar, or they're
Mm-hmm.
workaholic and all this stuff, and
Yes.
they can't do nothing else. And so, and then there are people I know that's always doing for other people, but they don't take care of them. So
Yes.
I never would have thought in a lifetime that that was a functional form of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you think people just being nice or they just busy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this stuff is just anxiety. If some of us feel like if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. But
Hmm.
self-care is productive. You
It
know,
is.
rest
It's
is
an
productive.
absolute necessity. Sleep is productive. Yes.
Yeah,
Those
and
things are a necessary and essential tool to create balance for ourselves, but to also keep ourselves well and healthy. Um, so going back to the other question you asked, which is some supportive things we can do. Um, Obviously, I'm going to say one of the best things that we could possibly do is to go and check in with a mental health professional. And I don't mean check in with us once the anxiety has shut us down or it has ruined dinner because I boiled over. I don't mean check in with me then. Actually, one of the best opportunities to check in with a mental health professional is when we start to see anxiety in these functional patterns. Because it, so one of the things that I find very interesting when I work with people with anxiety is the wonderful opportunities that I have with people who catch their functional anxiety early on. Because
Mhm.
there's a different thing that happens when the anxiety has gotten to a condition of it's debilitating me or I'm panicking. So earlier when I said that anxiety has both a cognitive function and a physiological function. And so what essentially happens is when I am in a state of like high alert, which is often what happens when we are anxiously functioning, right? It
Mhm.
puts our body in almost a fight or flight mode. Or for those of us who grew up in dangerous cultures, we may be in quote unquote survival mode. Well,
Yeah.
there's a physiological thing that's happening in the body. And
Mhm.
anyone who goes into a fight or flight mode, the
Mhm.
thinking brain turns off.
Okay.
And so, for those of us who want to do something about it, but maybe I'm giving anxiety such space in my life that it's now debilitating me, sometimes we find it a little bit more challenging to come up with solutions or to seek help or to do things about it. Because again, when my thinking brain turns off, the odds of me making decisions that are going to be productive for me decreases. So that's
Mm.
why I say it's really helpful if you really go in, you sit down with someone and you look at your actions and behaviors, or you look at your patterns of behavior early when you notice that there are things that are occurring with you.
That's good. Catch it early. Catch it
Catch it
early.
early, catch it early. Yes.
And you get rid of it a lot easier. You know,
Yes.
and something, you're saying something my dad has always kind of taught me, don't wait till things get out of control. And sometimes that's how we do life and we do our mind and our body. And we wait till it gets worse. Wait till we're
Mm-hmm.
drowning and then we want help. But we should have got it when it was small, it was little, and we can manage it better. And so this is really about management. We're all gonna face
Yes.
stress, we're all gonna become worried, but it's how we manage it. They tell me, I neglected my eyes for like a year, but I have like high pressure in my eyes, and they say about anything about glaucoma,
Mm-hmm.
you really don't see the consequences of it until it takes your sight. You really
Till
don't,
later. Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes we gotta be very careful. We have those checkups, physical checkups, mental checkups, emotional checkups, spiritual checkups, just so we can maintain and stay on top of our health in all aspects of our lives. And so if we do that, we can better steward and manage everything God has gifted us with. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything else you want to leave the people or give anyone? I definitely want you to promote what you do, and how people can tell people how they can reach you, if they like your service and your help, how can they reach you?
Well, you can definitely reach out to me on all of my social media platforms. Um, but I will share those at the end of my spiel. I don't want to leave you all empty-handed in terms of
Yeah.
like general strategies and tools that you might be able to utilize. So I always encourage people to see a mental health professional, whether or not you feel that your anxiety is mild, or you do notice that you have more severe, significant symptoms of anxiety. They all can be managed. It's just that the approaches that we use to manage it are different according to the level or the severity of anxiety for each person. General things that we can be doing at home um, is getting real with ourselves.
Yeah.
So authenticity is one of the things that I really work with people on, because I believe that authenticity almost works as almost like a moral compass or a caliber that helps us to understand, am I moving into situations or am I putting myself in places that may create room or that justify more reasons to worry. So I encourage people and I compel you, if I'm not being real or honest with the people around me about who I am and what I need, I'd urge you to reconsider it. Or you could just come sit down with me and do the work. Other things that we can do on a regular basis are self-care. So exercise is amazing for managing our mental health. Very, very good option. There are mindfulness techniques that we can do. So people do things like deep breathing techniques. Meditation is also really great for helping, to dial it down when anxiety is something that is challenging us. Prayer, I do not oppose prayer on any level, but prayer does fix things, but therapy and prayer are also equally useful.
Yes,
So
yes.
please don't be
Yes, it is.
afraid to come talk to one
Yes,
of us.
yes,
Listen,
yes.
a therapist in Jesus works wonders, okay?
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Mhm.
But really, coming up with a very tailored and a very specific strategy for your individual needs. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we in our culture, we're a very culture of show and tell. And so we kind of are socialized to look at other people and compare ourselves and go, oh, well, I'm not that bad off, or I'm not doing that thing. And we miss opportunities for our experience and our bodies to give us insight on how we might be able to function better in life. So sitting down with a mental health professional may offer you an opportunity to address some of those underlying challenges that feel as though they are justifications for the anxiety. So the best analogy that I can use is sort of like if we look at our lives like a play,
Mhm.
okay, there are always players in every single play. I'm going to use my life for example, and I would say my life would be sort of like a Tyler Perry play. Okay, because when my anxiety shows up, it kind of shows up like an unruly Medea. um, but in every one of Tyler Perry's plays, you have players that are going to function in a different role. So you have your Mr. Browns, um, and all of these players, they might represent experiences in our lives that we could benefit from going back to do the work to address. Okay, so for example, if I was someone who grew up in a very difficult environment, maybe
Yeah.
that's Mr. Brown. Maybe I was someone who grew up and I was abused, and maybe that's Miss Cora. And
Mhm.
so I feel justified to worry about my safety, right? So that creates space for anxiety or worry or fear. And then later in life, I had to drop out of college because there was a situation that happened. And so that's another person that plays a role in the play, and so on and so forth. And so before we know it, we get to this place where anxiety begins to consume quite a bit of our experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, maybe it is showing up and it's functional, but
Mhm.
I'm also very uncomfortable in my experiences and I'm moving around it. Particularly when I have to move around things, that usually is a very good indicator that I need to go and I need to sit down and I need to talk to a professional. Um, but having a very tailored program, a very tailored treatment plan to specifically address the things that seem to justify our own personal anxiety. Don't judge yourself based on another person, because the play of their life is different from the play of my life. And so the things that I need to get my anxiety under control are going to be different from the things that Anton needs in order to manage his anxiety. So each of us, we have to be very diligent and thoughtful about really listening to ourselves so that we understand how to best meet those needs, specifically when it comes to anxiety.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. I spoke with my psychologist, I think it was last month, or going into the new year, and I took some things. I was feeling a little anxious about some goals and so forth. She said, Antoine, you, through your experiences in all our sessions, and she's a Christian and so forth, and we pray. And she said, Antoine, you have this tendency to just kind of be anxious or worry about certain things that you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps me grounded. It keeps me grounded to be mindful of what I'm thinking. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
would look most about my psychologist and my friend and with those sessions was, you know, uh, it keeps you accountable. It keeps you
Mm-hmm.
accountable to be to be
To
in
be
control.
accountable to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, accountable to yourself and as well to them. So it keeps me in check. And so I'm mindful of what I'm thinking. You know,
Yeah.
I'm mindful. So it definitely is a positive to have a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, and so forth. We are coming at the conclusion of our uh, talk. And lastly, I would love for you to still give your information, how people can reach you.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So again, you can follow me on all of my social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and my business name is Thoughts and Things Therapy. So that's THOUGHTSANDTHINGS Therapy. I spell it out because I'm country, and a lot of people, when I say thoughts, they think I'm saying something else. But it's Thoughts and Things Therapy. You can reach out to me, private message, if you're interested in maybe services. I also do have a website, thoughtsandthingstherapy.com. You can reach out to me there, but generally the quickest way to get me is pull up my phone number, my business number on one of those platforms, and just reach out to me directly. Even if you don't want to work with me, I'm usually very willing to help you find a counselor if I know of someone who might be a better fit for you in your circumstance.
Wonderful, wonderful. I truly enjoyed you. I thank you for the information you have given and the resources you have and the wealth of knowledge that you have given. Everyone, I appreciate you for joining our Real Talk with Antoine D. Thurston. We thank you, and until next time, have a wonderful day, a wonderful night. Thank you again. Have a
Thank
wonderful day.
you.